All right, everybody, let's go live. How's it going? Chuck Holton here, coming to you from West Virginia, Maple Fork Lodge. And we've had a busy couple of days getting rid of all these puppies. We actually, I think after today, we might only have one puppy left. So thank you to all of you. I just talked to a guy that drove 9 hours, a hot zonian, been watching the show for years, drove down here from Chicago to pick up a puppy and take it home to his kids for Christmas. Pretty awesome getting to meet people like that. And I'm always amazed at this community. We just have an amazing community of people that have come together around the hot zone. So thank you very much for being here. Please do me a favor and post in the chat where you're watching from. If you just came on, you probably have to be on for 60 seconds before you can do that. But while you're waiting, make sure that you hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about what's happening in Syria. There's a real blow up that took place yesterday and actually has been brewing for some time, something that we've talked about on this show quite a bit. And so we're going to talk about that some more. Before we do that, however, we need to say a word from our sponsor, Bearskin. We have a new sponsor today, and I love this stuff. Check it out. Today's sponsor is Bearskin Jackets. Now, most jackets are either overpriced fashion ornaments or flimsy outdoor gear designed for guys who think walking to the mailbox counts as an expedition. Bearskin is not for people like that. These things are legit. It's cold out here today, and these are rugged, warm, weather-resistant, and ridiculously comfortable. They're built for people who actually live life outside, travel hard, work hard, and don't want to freeze while pretending that they look cool. So they got real features too. Pockets where you need them, zippers that's not going to panic under stress, warmth without turning you into the Michelin Man. You can wear it in rough weather, on the range, hiking, traveling, or just to remind the world you're not made of soy and yoga mats. And here's the kicker. Bearskin's running their biggest deal, 60% off. And here's the kicker. Bearskin's running their biggest deal, 60% off, extended returns, and free U.S. shipping from their Kentucky warehouse. So yeah, kind of a no-brainer. Here's how you get one. Text the word Chuck to 36912. That's Chuck to 36912, and they'll send you the link. You'll thank me later. All right, well, thank you to Bearskin. The other thing I like about Bearskin is that they support the Second Amendment. They sent me this t-shirt about the right to bear arms. I thought that was pretty cool. And so thank you to Bearskin, our new sponsor. I really do like these things. They're very comfortable. They got pockets all over. You can put patches on them. And so I recommend you get one. Definitely worth doing, especially at the price point that they're at now with this 60% off. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on in Syria. Last night, there was a whole bunch of fighting that broke out in Syria between the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, and the forces of al-Jilani's GSS, or government, what do they call that? Government Security Service. That's the new government of the western two-thirds of Syria going up against the organization or the people group that's been governing the eastern third of Syria for the last, 12 years, something like that, long time, in Rojava. We've talked a lot about this. Of course, I've traveled to Syria many times. I was there this year. And actually, some of the stories that I made, I went back and was looking through some of the stories that I've done about Syria, and it's just amazing how prescient they were, prophetic, and just how relevant they still are today. I could take that same story and run it on CBN today, and not change a thing, and it would be perfectly relevant for today. So I'm going to show you some of that in a minute. But this is last night in Syria. There was apparently 2 people killed and clashes between the Kurds, that's the SDF, and the transitional government forces. And of course, each side's blaming each other. A bunch of people are being driven from their homes.
الماضية وصلنا 10 إصابات، 2 منهم
This guy says over the past hours we've received a couple of injuries. I've been to that hospital, by the way.
حالة كانت حالة حرجة تم قبولها في العناية المشددة. تم استهداف محيط مشفى الرازي.
Saying the area around the hospital was shelled. Casualties are civilians and 2 brothers with civil defense. That's the white helmets. So that's what it looked like in Syria last night. And unfortunately, almost every time I've been to Syria, it's looked like that. Now, I'm going to point out kind of how this works its way back to American deterrent power or lack thereof, and how a foreign policy that's recidivist, that is foreign policy that is backing away from global geopolitics, is actually making the world a more dangerous place. And it's making it more likely that things like this are going to break out. Now, I will tell you one thing that I've heard from my friends in Syria that you're not hearing in the news right now, and that is the forces that they are ascribing to the GSS, al-Jilani's forces, are actually being bolstered by the Turkish military. So the Turks are moving their forces into place inside Syria and co-locating them with al-Jilani's forces, essentially using them as, I would say, in a way, as human shields against Israel, so that Israel can't bomb those Turkish forces, because Israel's already said they're not going to put up with Turkish forces being inside Syria. And the Turks, of course, want their forces to be inside Syria. So there's that. I mean, it's just the Turks, we know for a fact, have been moving troops and tanks and things into Syria. As a matter of fact, there's footage here of this Turkish armor moving down toward Deir ez-Zor. Turn that audio off. And you can see there, that's some serious firepower that's going down there. They're moving those down toward the areas that are controlled or at least populated by ISIS or pro-ISIS individuals. So we've talked about this before, but I want to first get to 2 things. Number one, a report from the Institute for the Study of War, which talks about this in great detail. And this is a report that came out last February. Now, this should give us all pause here, because last February, they came out with this report that says a U.S. withdrawal from Syria would reinvigorate the ISIS terror threat. And I got to quit saying that word, because every time I say that word, I get this video demonetized. So that's why, folks, you need to be over at chuckholton.com, because you can support our channel over there. If you're going to support the channel, that's the best place to do it. Plus, you get early access to lots of extra stuff. You get phone calls with me every month, and so on and so forth. But it does really help to kind of keep us on the air, because just talking about the things that are happening in the world gets me demonetized on YouTube on a regular basis. Last week, I ended up working for free for 3 out of 5 days because of that stupid YouTube. I mean, it makes me crazy. So there we go. Now, again, this is from February, where they're saying the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria would risk reversing hard-earned gains against the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham. It is kept in check by the combined pressure of U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria and their Kurdish allies. The withdrawal of U.S. forces will remove that pressure and allow Daesh to reconstitute, likely rapidly, to dangerous levels. Rapidly, they're saying down here, the next paragraph, that Daesh could resurge in 12 to 24 months without a U.S. presence in Syria. The U.S. spent the past several years building its, I'm sorry, not the U.S. Daesh has spent the last several years rebuilding its strength there, leading U.S. Central Command to warn in July that the group is trying to reconstitute. So we know that is the case. And we have had a great ally in that fight in the Kurds. The Kurds have lost more than 12,000 men fighting Daesh. And in so doing, I think they have proven themselves as our greatest ally in trying to keep that threat at bay. One of the things that report goes on to say is this could expand as Daesh. I'm using Daesh because I think I'm less likely to get demonetized if I say that instead of the other word that is 4 letters, 2 I's, and 2 S's, if you know what I mean. I gotta quit saying that word because it literally, if I say it 3 or 4 times in a whole hour, they demonetize the video. And I can go back and ask them to take a look at it because it's the AI that demonetizes it. And so you can ask for a human to review it. And when they do, then they go, oh, it's fine. They turn it back on. But by then it's had all its views. And so I just basically worked for free that day, all the research that I did and everything. So anyway, that's why I'm saying Daesh. Now, what they're saying is that if Daesh is able to reconstitute in Syria, then it raises the threat level for attacks by Daesh in the United States and in Europe, because they project power just like any other entity does. And the stronger they are, we've talked about this just recently when we were talking about the scams that are taking place in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. They are not just using taxpayer dollars that they're scamming from the American people to send over to Africa and elsewhere to support terror organizations, but they're also recruiting from the United States. They're radicalizing people by recruiting them here in the States, sending them over to Syria, letting them fight alongside their Daesh brothers for a time, get some good combat training, get some good, radicalization poured into one ear, and then send them back to the United States. They are specifically targeting people who have a U.S. passport, because then they don't need a visa to get into the U.S. They can pass right through our system. And how are you going to know they're radicalized? I've run into American citizens in Syria who were over there fighting alongside. So it is definitely a problem, And that problem was being pretty much kept at bay. We were keeping a lid on it by having about 2,000 U.S. troops in the area. Those troops were not doing a whole lot except for the special operations guys. The rest of them were just there as kind of support for the SDF. And this SDF needs that support if they're going to keep all of the Daesh families and fighters that they have in prison there instead of letting them go. And so that's been one of the real frustrations, is that the Trump administration doesn't seem to understand the dynamics here. Because they don't understand the dynamics, they are buddying up to the wrong people. And that has literally gotten American citizens killed in the last week or two. So take a look at this report that I made after we went into the area that had been controlled by Daesh on one of my recent trips to Syria. And again, everything, this is a couple years old, but everything in this video is still relevant, and the situation really hasn't changed. Take a look. When ISIS seized control of much of Syria and Iraq in 2014, their stated goal was to create an Islamic caliphate that would dominate the entire region with their extremist ideology. It took nearly 5 years for world powers to retake that territory, and even to this day, the scars of war are everywhere in northern Syria, reminders of the brutality of that conflict. Muhammad Ahmed has seen it firsthand, having been shot 6 times while fighting ISIS as an Iraqi soldier.
You see this piece of metal like pipe, and they cut it and they weld it, and they make a small hole and they put explosive stuff inside it, and they make a charger inside it and with wire, and they bomb like armored or tanks or people in these things and make like huge explosion. And they make a houses like the factory for make car bombs, landmine and IED, a lot of stuff they make.
Walking around this abandoned village in northern Syria, it's easy to see how the millions of people who have fled this conflict and gone to other places like Europe and Turkey and even the United States probably are not going to want to come back anytime soon. The animals are gone, their homes are practically destroyed, the wells have dried up, and moving back to this area would be very, very difficult. So that just means that it's going to continue to be costly to the entire world as more and more people become wards of the United Nations, the World Food Program, and other organizations that have to end up feeding these people to help them survive. Once the headquarters of the self-proclaimed ISIS caliphate, the city of Raqqa is still picking up the pieces after the terror group lost the city in 2017. But citizens say things are far better than before.
It's been more better for the last time because we have safety, the safety for our children. This is our city. We love her. We love our city. We can't leave our city.
When ISIS was in control, they never knew if they'd live to see another day.
Die everywhere, and the ashes of people everywhere. The horrible, horrible thing in every minute in Raqqa. We can't think of anything more than bread.
But threats remain. ISIS has begun taking ground for the first time since 2017 and making coordinated attacks against civilian and military targets. This is the city of Kobani, and it saw some incredibly fierce fighting back in 2014, 2015 during a 5-month siege by ISIS. And the Kurdish forces eventually successfully drove them out. This was ISIS high watermark, but as you can see, there were some unbelievable battles here in that process. Now, ISIS is starting to reconstitute in Syria down south of here in a place called Deir ez-Zor. And so we're starting to see some attacks, and that means we may very well see ISIS resurging around the world in the months to come. Here in northeast Syria, Kurdish fighters are staying vigilant, determined not to let ISIS repeat the horrors of 2014. But these developments are especially concerning as the U.S. looks to end combat operations in neighboring Iraq by the end of December, leaving many in the region fearing a repeat of the disastrous pullout in Afghanistan earlier this year. And citizens are hoping American foreign policy won't leave them on their own.
Give you the hope. We looking to the hope. Right. Thank God. Now, a little hope, but it's good.
From Raqqa, northern Syria, I'm Chuck Holton.
Dad, you're muted again.
I did it again. Sorry. So what I was saying is everything in there is still relevant. I'm sure it still even looks the same. As a matter of fact, I was back in Raqqa this year and visited those same stores and streets, and it's exactly the same as it was. They're still trying to pick up the pieces because that country was destroyed in the fight to try to eradicate Daesh. And that is now moving into its next phase. So as you know, the United States made strikes against those Daesh sort of upstarts in the desert area just to the east, to the west of the Euphrates River down near Deir ez-Zor. I have a map here from the Institute for the Study of War that you can take a look at. And the area that is in sort of mauve, I don't know, what is that color? That sort of reddish brown in the southern part of the country. Those are areas that are very much under the control of unidentified opposition groups, is what they say. Unidentified opposition groups. What they mean when they say that is Daesh. And that's not the only place that there are fighters or families or people who are friendly to Daesh are located. They're all over in the western part of Syria, but they're mostly concentrated in that area. Now, that sort of reddish brown area actually goes into you see the circular baby blue area in the southern part of the country. That's actually a deconfliction zone around the U.S. base down there. So what we mean by that is we don't want any unidentified forces, military forces or otherwise, coming into that baby blue area because that would pose a threat to U.S. troops that are down there. So if they want to come in there, if they're, let's say, from the GSS, or if they're Turkish or something like that, then they need to call a hotline that we set up, even if they're the enemy, like the Russians used to do this. They would call a hotline and then say, hey, we're going to be flying over that area. Please don't shoot us down. When they don't do that, things go bad very quickly. There was an event that took place, I think it was back in about 2020 or 2021, where Wagner Group mercenaries approached a U.S. base and did not signal their intent beforehand. They didn't call the deconfliction line. The U.S. warned them to stay away. They kept advancing, and it looked like they were planning to take over the U.S. base, which was a non-starter for the U.S. And so the U.S. smoked 300 Russian mercenaries in just like an hour. They just brought in air support and absolutely smoked those guys. Hey, Maricopa Joe, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I really appreciate you, and we pray for you a lot. And I hope that you get a handle on your pain very soon. So what I'm pointing out here is that things are changing, but they're also staying the same. They're changing in that we no longer have to worry about Bashar al-Assad and his horrors that he was inflicting on people in the country. But we do have to worry about al-Sharaa and his people. So I showed you this report from the Institute for the Study of War, and you can read that report on your own if you want by just going to understandingwar.com. About a U.S. withdrawal from Syria will reinvigorate the terror network, the terror threat from Daesh. That was from February of this year. What happened? The United States in March started pulling troops out of the region. We went from about 2,000 or a little over 2,000 troops down to now just a few hundred troops that are left. And they changed their job description. What they were doing before was supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurds, and helping them keep a lid on Daesh. But now what our troops are doing over there, we're pretty much ignoring the Kurds, leaving them to their own devices, and if anything, just pressuring them to join forces with al-Sharaa's government. What the United States doesn't understand about that, or the Trump administration doesn't understand about that, is that the SDF has no intention of joining with those forces under al-Sharaa, because they have very, very different ideologies, and they don't believe it.
So sorry. I need to know where the dog's medicine is. They're here to pick her up.
Oh, it's on the white cabinet in the bathroom, okay. I believe, or else it's, yeah, I think that's where it is. Yeah. That's my lovely wife. We are doing a great job at getting rid of these puppies. So thank you to all of you who came to or get puppies and put out the word. Thank you for those of you who help support us by sending donations to help pay for their food, because it's expensive. Okay, so the Kurds, look, I know a lot of Kurds, and I keep in touch with them very often. And they're telling me, do you know that in the areas that are under al-Shara's control, they are instituting Sharia law? We don't want to live under Sharia law. The Kurds, by and large, are Sunni Muslims, just like Daesh, but it's a whole different, it'd be like the difference between stodgy Methodists with a lesbian pastor and a fire-breathing West Virginia Baptist preacher. There's two different ends of the spectrum there in terms of extremism. I wouldn't say the Baptist pastor is extremist. I'm extremist, but you get my point. They are not friendly with each other. The United States had a really good thing going with the Kurds. We worked with them for almost 12 years, and we never once lost a U.S. troop in Kurdish-held territory. Never once. There was never a terror attack that came from the Kurds. So, as a matter of fact, they thwarted a lot of terror attacks because they don't put up with that stuff in the Kurdish-held territories. There are also in those territories the last remaining vestiges of Syriac Christians, Maronites, Yazidis, etc. All different faiths. They used to be much bigger portions of the population in Syria. Now we're down to just very, very few people left. But there are still some Christian villages in the Khabur River Valley that I visited when I was there in March. I talked to some of the Armenian Christians that live in those villages, and they said, we absolutely refuse to live under al-Shara, under al-Shara's government. We will not live under them. And so we are going to fight if we have to fight. So that is what we are seeing take place now. The United States and the Syrian transitional government issued an ultimatum to the SDF that they have to integrate their forces under al-Shara, under his command, by the end of December, in the next week. They're not making any plans to do that. They're not making any steps in that direction because, again, the SDF is just absolutely not going to submit itself to Sharia law. And so the Turks have jumped in and said, if the SDF does not submit itself to al-Shara's government, then we are going to come in and attack the SDF. So now the SDF, look, they've been preparing for this for a long time. So al-Shara's military probably is not strong enough to conquer the SDF. As a matter of fact, they would probably lose. And I would say, my opinion, if it was just al-Shara against the SDF would win. The Kurds would take over the rest of Syria and take control. But al-Shara's government has support, not just from the United States, but from Turkey. Turkey is right there. They have a border with Syria. Turkey has been moving troops into Syria over the last several weeks, and they've had troops there in the north for years, since 2018. The Syria or the SDF does not have the combat power to withstand the Turkish military. Now they will make a good showing for themselves. The Kurds often say that they have no actual friends but the mountains. The mountains are their only friends. And the fighters, the Peshmerga fighters, of the SDF are legendary. So it's, if there is fighting, the fighting that we saw yesterday kicked off in Aleppo. So maybe we ought to pull up this map again. You know what I need to do? I need to show you a map. Let me go to an actual map where I can zoom around. All right, so we'll go look at Syria here. Let's see here and go back. There we go. All right, so thank you, Nathan. So the area of Syria that's to the east of this line here, this is the Euphrates River. Then it goes up around this Tishreen Dam over here and up toward Aleppo. This is area that's controlled by the SDF. And so you can see it's a sizable part of Syria. It's not just a little pocket. The rest of Syria, for the most part, is controlled by al-Shura and his government, with the exception of the areas down here in the south, far south of the country, that are controlled by Israel, and the Druze-controlled areas just to the east of the area Israel controls. All right. And you can see the yellow up in the top of that map. Those are areas that Turkey now controls. So what Turkey is saying they're going to do is they're going to take over all of the purple area. Now, I don't think the United States would be on board with that typically, but it's hard to say with President Trump because I hate to say this, but he is realigning America with Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, Turkey. These are not our friends. President Trump is maybe, I'm sorry, I said Iran, I meant Qatar. President Trump is aligning America with our adversaries in many cases, and disengaging from our allies. This does not bode well for America or for the world. If you think we can afford to just stick our heads in the sand here in the United States and just not pay attention to anything that's happening overseas, you are mistaken. Those things do come back to bite us. Just like what we're talking about here with Syria. Within Syria, if Daesh is able to reconstitute and to gain strength, that puts more of a threat of attacks by Daesh on the United States and on Western Europe. There's no two ways about that. That is a certainty. So President Trump has disengaged from the SDF now, kind of left them to their own devices, which has given Turkey the green light to start attacking them. Our allies who literally shed blood to wipe out Daesh the first time. A lot of blood. They put a lot more into that than the United States did. President Trump claimed to have destroyed the Islamic State. President Trump had very little to do with it, all things considered, except for the fact that we were supporting the Kurds while they were fighting. Okay, so this is the way it was working, and it was working okay. President Trump pulled out partially in 2018, and now he's pretty much pulled out completely from supporting the Kurds. And he's thrown his support behind a former al-Qaeda terrorist named Ahmed al-Shura. We've repurposed the U.S. forces over there. The special ops guys are still taking it to Daesh, but we've repurposed the rest of our forces in Syria to actually train al-Shura's forces. This is a very bad idea, as evidenced by the 3 Americans who were killed a week and a half ago in Syria as they were going to a key leader engagement with al-Shura's forces. And they were killed by a jihadi from Daesh who had infiltrated into al-Shura's forces That's not real hard to do. And we lost 3 soldiers, or 2 soldiers and an interpreter in that attack. This is the cost of removing our support from our allies and trying to win the war with charm and force of will alone. President Trump has a very strong force of will. He can practically call things into existence, some people think, because if he just declares it to be so, it just happens. In Syria, that's not going to be the case. I'm sorry about that, but that's just the truth of the matter. Okay, I'm trying to make this a shorter live because I've got some things to do today, but let's go over and start asking some of our questions and get into our comments. So John says, are you saying Turkey is supplying Daesh with weapons? Yes, they're supplying them with money, which they're using to procure weapons. I have proof of that from years ago when at the end of the ISIS Caliphate, 2018, 2019, Turkey actually absorbed about 40,000 Daesh troops into the Turkish army, and then later on formed what became the Free Syrian Army out of those United Nations of Daesh, with American funding. A lot of that money that armed them actually came not just from Turkey, but from the United States. Believe it or not, that was under Barack Obama. Next question. Does your included reports with demonetizing words also demonetize the current video? Probably so. I really appreciate people like MM there with the $20 tip, and let's see, Chewy Boardman for, I think that's Australian, 10 Australian dollars, and Maricopa Joe with very, very generous $199.99. Thank you so much for that, because otherwise on this video, I'm probably not getting paid. So even though YouTube keeps a good portion of that, we're very grateful to all of you. And if you're not a supporter over at chuckholton.com, please become one. That's the best way to support us. Next question. How about getting all the family together for a picture for us? We will probably post something like that over at locals. Go to chuckholton.com around Christmas. Now, we don't have the whole family here yet, so not quite yet. Next question. How about getting, aren't the Daesh, D-A-E-S-H is how that's spelled, and Kurds Muslims? Yes, I mentioned that. The Kurds and Daesh are both Sunni Muslims, but one is far, far more extreme than the other. All you have to do is go to Kurdistan and walk around town. You'll see women walking around with their heads uncovered. It's very common. You don't see a lot of burqas. They are very progressive, modern, and friendly, incredibly generous people. If you ever go out to eat with a Kurd, you are going to get rolled out of there. You'll be so full because they will feed you until you think you're going to die. They are wonderful people. I love the Kurds. And actually, so does Israel. Israel and the Kurds get along really well. One other thing, too, we've seen is that Israel says that they've been taking all the weapons that they've confiscated from Hezbollah and Hamas, and they're giving them to the Druze in Asweda. So that's great. That is the really wonderful use for those weapons. There's several reports out recently about that Israel is supplying those weapons to the Druze so that they can defend themselves against al-Sharaz forces who have repeatedly attacked them over the past year. So next question. I thought Syria and Kurdish-led SDF agreed to de-escalate after deadly clashes in Aleppo. Well, they did, and then they gave the Kurds this ultimatum that you have to integrate your forces with al-Sharaz forces. We'll let you keep a certain number of battalions, but you have to submit them to command by al-Shara's chain of command. And as far as the Kurds are concerned, that's like taking our forces that have been fighting Daesh for all these years, and we've lost 12,000 men doing it, and now putting them under the command of Daesh, because the Kurds don't see much of a difference between al-Shara and Daesh. Even though there is a difference, and al-Shara's forces, for the most part, most of them, are not on board with Daesh's agenda, but they're still pretty far down that road, if you know what I mean. The next question is, Country Boy says, can Israel help the Kurds? Yes, they are. I believe they've been giving them money. They've been, I know for the Druze, they've been paying the Druze fighters $200 to $300 a month for the last, I don't know, 5-6 months, since July, I think. The Israelis are actually paying their salaries. So I think they are also helping the Kurds as well. Next question. There are thousands of captured Daesh terrorists in prison in Kurdish region. What happens to the prisoners if Kurdish people lose control over northern Syria? Yeah, what the U.S., the Trump administration has been saying is that the Kurds need to just let those people go and let them reintegrate into the society under al-Shara. The Kurds don't think that's a good idea for obvious reasons, because they take a bunch of people who are more radical today than when they were put in prison, because they've done nothing but increasingly radicalize each other in prison. And just set them free in al-Shara's Syria, they could pretty easily become the ruling party there at some point if al-Shara's not careful. So yeah, not a good idea. Next question. Is Cookie the puppy gone? I believe so. I believe Cookie left today. Next question. Show us the puppies. I don't have any. Well, I might have an image of them here somewhere. Let's see if I can find one. I'll look at. Well, here's all 8 of them, but this is not updated. So all but one are spoken for at this point. These are the puppies, and they're almost all gone, or they will be by the end of the day today. Next question. Will our trips come home now? Oh, troops. Will our troops come home now? Well, they've moved a bunch of them out of there, but they still have several hundred of them in Syria, and they're not planning on leaving anytime soon. But as I said, they've changed their jobs, so they're just not doing the right stuff, really. They should be there supporting the Kurds. Next question. Team Zipper Lips, thank you very much for that $30. I really appreciate you and the Christmas wishes. Thank you. And Leona Gibson, thank you for that. Very kind. I'm just blown away by you guys. You guys are great. All right. Looks like last question here. Where's Huckabee and all this? Can anybody with sound reason from a Christian standpoint put wisdom in Trump's ear to help him make better choices? Trump surrounds himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear. And that's very unfortunate, because if you're going to be in a position of leadership, you really need people around you who are going to point out when your zipper is down. President Trump has really fired everybody who would tell him his zipper was down. So he's just kind of, just saying stuff. And now he's back on the Greenland kick again. Look, America is not going to get Greenland. It's not going to happen. It's belonged to the Dutch or to the Netherlands since the 1300s. America's not. We don't have any reason to take Greenland. We already have what we need from Greenland. We have troops there. But now President Trump's on this Greenland kick again. He'll probably come back around to Panama again at some point. It's just it's tiring. It's unfortunate, because President Trump is doing a great job with economic policy, domestic policy. He's doing a great job eradicating DEI and all the left-wing stupid stuff from America. And when it comes to foreign policy, it seems like he just wants to be friends with all of our enemies and enemies with all of our friends. That's a problem. That's not called being a peacemaker. That's called changing sides and joining the opposition. You're making peace by joining your adversary is called surrender. It's not a good plan. All right, folks, that's all I've got for today. I've got to run, but thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone. I appreciate all of you more than you know, and I'm not going to be on tomorrow. Well, I might be on tomorrow. We might do a short live tomorrow, just as a Merry Christmas kind of thing. But I hope you have a wonderful holiday. I can't believe, you're so faithful, all of you viewers, that we still consistently are keeping pretty good numbers even 2 days before Christmas. That's amazing. So we're going to try to increase the value of the videos that we put out over the coming year. We're looking at some ways to really increase the production value and put out more content for you as best we can. So thank you very much for watching. God bless you. We'll see you next time.